Welcome into the latest edition of the Unpaid Interns. Apologize for technical difficulties getting us off to a bit of a late start. Austin Render joined by Tamar Share on Wednesday, August 5th. We are so happy to have you, and we're happy to have Tamar here joining us as a co-host. Tamar, let's get right into it here. We're into the month of August, and we knew this was going to be a busy month, and it has been so far. The biggest story has been the failure of the MLB. They're pressing forward. They're as some teams like the Marlins try and play catch up. They returned last night and they won over the Orioles. They're now 3-1 on the season, but the Marlins, the Phillies, the Cardinals are still kind of in lockdown right now. All these teams trying to play catch up, but the MLB still seems steadfast to keep moving forward.
Right. I was going to mention the Cardinals, of course. They now have 52 days to play 55 games in order to complete the 60-game season. So no matter which way you turn it, there's not going to be a complete season, unfortunately, because this is just the nature of the beast. Cardinals now have 13, both players and staff members that have contracted the virus. And it's tough. Yadier Molina, he is one of the most important players on this Cardinals team, and he's sitting out. He can't play because he got the virus, which stinks. They said that they're doing and going along with all the protocols, but this is just the nature of it. And moving along to the NBA, they're doing a great job. The bubble is working.
The bubble is very much working, and the NHL as well. The NHL has had zero positive tests so far, and that's a huge sign for both leagues and also for teams like leagues like the NFL. Can you create any sort of bubble? I don't think they can, but the bubble is working. And I have to throw in the Pacers 3-0. I know their strength of schedule has not been incredibly difficult, but TJ Warren has scored over 30 points in all three of his games. He has just been red hot, and I'm excited about the way the Pacers are playing right now. But the NBA, boy, it's really interesting. You got the Grizzlies, who should have been the 8th seed. Now they've lost 3 straight games and will likely not make the playoffs. Zion Williamson and the Pelicans look to be falling out of it. The Blazers are getting hot. I'm really excited to watch the end of this season for the NBA because you watch the MLB and you're thinking, okay, when is an outbreak going to happen? Or at least that's me. And I'm watching the NBA and I'm not worried about it. And I think a lot of credit goes to Adam Silver. This bubble idea was crazy when you first heard it and everything that was going to go on in the bubble and everything that they had to do to make the bubble safe. I think we all thought, no, there's no way. And credit to Adam Silver, credit to the NBA for making this work because it is giving us a sports league where we don't have to worry about the virus at the moment. And same with the NHL. And they're both doing a really good job of that. So kudos to them. And before Zach joins us, I have to say that I'm very excited this week. This is kind of my soapbox here. I thought week 2 when the PGA Tour came back, they were in Hilton Head and they got their first test. Then the next week they go to Connecticut and they get 7 people who withdraw because of COVID. And I'm thinking there's no way golf is going to survive because golf is doing a bubble, but it's a traveling bubble going all over the place. And so that to me then defeats the purpose of said bubble. And the fact that the PGA Tour has kept it together, they've had positive tests. There's no denying and there's no getting away from that. But they've been able to keep it pretty locked down. The players are taking it seriously. And all of a sudden, you've got a PGA Tour event now that's a major. And I never would have thought 2 months ago when you told me they were starting it up again, like, oh, is this going to work? Are they going to make it to any of these big tournaments? We've made it. And I hope other golf fans out there are with me. Who cares if it's the worst of the 4 major tournaments? It is a major championship. We get to watch the best players in the world. And I just never would have thought that we would have gotten that. And it makes me appreciate it even more with how far we've had to come to make this work. And I'm thrilled. So this is a busy sports month. We've got the NBA playoffs coming up in a couple weeks. The NHL playoffs have already begun, the qualifying rounds. The MLB is starting to get into the heat of its season. And boy, tomorrow, this is going to be a really fun stretch. And what happened this morning, which we will be talking to Zach Osterman about when he joins us here momentarily, is the Big Ten schedule was released this morning. We've kind of been patiently or impatiently waiting on that schedule that we thought was going to come out at some point this week. They released it this morning. And tomorrow, Indiana got a tough start to the season. First 6 games are going to be no cakewalk.
Yes, they did. I was listening to the BTN broadcast earlier this morning, and Tom Allen said, "We're all about making history at Indiana." That was one of his quotes that I liked the most. The LEO he got in there at the end, but really, it's going to be a tough start for Indiana. I'm excited to hear what Zach has to say, but the schedule totally changed up. I think everything besides Wisconsin was changed for this schedule. It's going to continue to change because we don't know. These are unprecedented times, of course, keep saying that, but it's cool that they are starting to get some consistency of what a schedule is going to look like. And there are so many announcements to be made. University of Connecticut will not play. This is the first university to say that they will not be playing football. Obviously, that does not go along with the Big Ten, but still notable. Teams are still opting out.
Well, Punt John Punt always takes the S&P Plus ratings from ESPN's Bill Connolly, and they create the amount of predicted wins for football teams, and Punt John Punt does it for Indiana. And it was 7.4 with the previous schedule. That was kind of the average of the metrics, which is a pretty good average for an Indiana team. And now it has dropped to 5.2 with the loss of 3 non-conference teams, with the addition of Minnesota to the schedule. They flipped Michigan and Michigan State. So Michigan State is now a road game for the second straight year. Michigan will be a home game for the second straight year. But nonetheless, it is a bit of a difficult schedule for the Hoosiers coming down the stretch. That's certainly something we will have to keep our eyes on. Just waiting on Zach Osterman from the Indy Star to join us, and we're going to get real in-depth with that schedule. But Tamara, you watched Tom Allen this morning. What were your kind of takeaways from his little bit on BTN?
Takeaways were that they're playing it by ear. They're going to be strong, of course. They're always strong on the defensive end, and they're going to continue that. And also, they have some really strong returners on the offense. You got Michael Penix Jr., you got Stevie Scott, you got Watt Fillier. So these are guys that will be able to get the offense where it needs to be. And he didn't go into much depth, like you said. It was kind of, wow, this is the announcement. I got 2 seconds to look at it, and I'm going live on BTN. So there wasn't as much of a kind of breakdown of schedule, but in the next few days, that's what we're going to see. And he has hope. Like I said he wants to make history. That's all what they're about, is making history at Indiana. But, he admitted the first couple games, the entire schedule, it's going to be tough. And they're going to have to put everything into it. But another thing he said was that in terms of the regulations and safety protocols that they're putting into place, now, we can't regulate what the players are doing when they're not with the team, but they put a really strong emphasis on not partying, not hanging in big groups, even when they're in the dorm rooms or in the apartments with other players. They want playing video games. They still want to be 6 feet apart. They want to be distanced. You're not going to be on top of each other. And that is going to be for the entirety of this semester and for this season. So I think he's hopeful, which is good. He said that little LEO at the end, which we love.
I heard that. Yeah, he always never fails to sneak that in there.
Right, I know, and it's the best saying at this time, especially. But
Yeah,
We'll see.
they're still planning to start February 4th. They'll take on the Wisconsin Badgers at Camp Randall. That's still a set to go starting date for the Big Ten. They'll be the Friday night game, and then the Big Ten will rally a couple of games off on the Saturday following. And the interesting part to me is that the conferences are all so different in the way they're doing it. We'll talk to Zach about it. He's wrapping up his story right now for the Indy Star on the new schedule release. But it'll be interesting to see. The SEC has already pushed back its start date. The Big 12 is up, and the Pac-12 is back. So we'll see how that all works out. There's so many moving parts and so many different ways to do it. Here's Zach Osterman joining us from the Indy Star. Zach, I know it's a busy day for you with the schedule drop this morning. Thanks for joining us.
Yeah, sorry I'm a little late.
No, you're good. And real life happens every so often, and we got breaking news this morning with the new schedule. I guess your first thoughts. You're kind of writing the story about it. What's your overall takeaways when you first saw the new schedule?
Yeah, I think the sort of the line that dictates everything else is Kevin Warren, saying pretty plainly that they can't guarantee there will be a college football season. He talked at length about his confidence in the Big Ten's, sort of medical guidelines, testing protocols, all those different things. He said that as the father of a student athlete, his son plays at football at Mississippi State. He would feel comfortable with what's been set out by the conference. But he also admitted, very upfront that he really, I think his words were, it would be pure speculation for him to even put sort of a percentage chance on there being a season, or I think at very least a season in the fall. The Big Ten, built in basically 3 bye weeks for everyone to try and give them schedule flexibility in the event that games can't start on time or need to be delayed or anything like that. But ultimately, the reality everyone is acknowledging is that there's no guarantee this is doable.
And what were your initial? Yeah.
Go ahead, Tamar. Yeah.
I was just going to ask what your initial thoughts were on this new 10-game schedule. Everything shifted for Indiana, but what were your takeaways immediately from today's?
Yeah, I mean, for Indiana, obviously, it's a very difficult schedule, and I think that was always going to be the case. If you're dropping, I mean, Indiana had a pretty favorable non-conference schedule this season. Ball State and Western Kentucky at home, plus a trip to UConn. Dropping those off, it would have been pretty hard to add, another conference opponent, presumably, obviously from the West, and a road game, because this was a season where Indiana was expected to have 5 home games. That wasn't going to make the schedule more difficult. It's very front loaded. They still open Friday, September 4th at Wisconsin, or we should say they are still scheduled to open. You really can't speak in guarantees right now. But then from there, within their first 6 games, they'll go to Wisconsin, Ohio State, and Minnesota. That's their new crossover game to get to 10. And they'll also host Ohio State and Michigan in those first 6 with a bye built in. The last 4 are, if you want to say quote unquote more doable, I suppose. Maryland and Purdue at home, Michigan State and Rutgers on the road. But, it goes from being a season where it seemed like the schedule was shaping up relatively comfortably for Indiana to being one that could, just quite frankly, be very, very difficult.
Well, now my next question is, and you may not know the answer to this, but it seems crazy to me that all of the conferences are just kind of taking their own plans, and there doesn't seem to be a whole lot of continuity. There's continuity in the fact that they're all playing their own conferences, but what are your thoughts on everybody starting at different times? Everybody has different thoughts about fans, and where could bowl games fall into all this?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think anybody's really ready to cross the bridge of bowl games. On the one hand, it just kind of work backward through that question. On the one hand, it seems very difficult to me to imagine bowl games happening at this point. On the other, I understand, of course, that bowl games are big business. They're big business, not just for the bowls, but for the teams involved, the conference affiliations, and of course the television networks, who, the conferences, owe a lot to, metaphorically speaking, in terms of their revenue streams. So I don't know if anybody's really ready to figure that problem out just yet. I think we're really just kind of seeing everyone kind of in how can we get through preseason camp and get to the season mode, frankly. But I think that, I think what you're seeing with the individual conferences is a couple of things. On a micro level, what it essentially is an attempt basically to narrow the scope of what you have to govern and manage. So if you're only playing conference teams, and this isn't just in football, it's in all sports, you only have to worry about the public health situation in 14 cities, and using the Big Ten as an example. And more broadly, what is it? I think 10 or 11 states. You don't have to worry about somebody, a team going to play a tournament in California and bringing something back or whatever. You can limit travel more. You can do more, frankly, day of travel. I think you'll probably see more of that than you normally would. Looking at a game, for example, IU Purdue, would be very easy as an example to do just in one day. It's maybe not optimal. It's certainly not what you'd prefer, but I think that's more of what you're going to see. The more macro answer to that question is that I think, and this is not based so much on hard evidence as it is just on having watched the way the college athletics landscape has kind of evolved in the last 10 to 15 years. I think what you're frankly going to start seeing is a move by the Power Five conferences further away from the NCAA leadership structure. And I don't know that means the NCAA ceases to exist, but I think it's possible it alters form, pretty much forever. We're already seeing widespread suggestion that if the NCAA, which is having a meeting on this later today, they were actually expected, we're talking on Wednesday, the 5th of August, they were expected yesterday to potentially come out with a decision about holding fall sports championships or canceling them. It sounds like that decision may actually come today, and it's already been widely reported that Power Five conferences might just hold their own championships if the NCAA won't, and they'll just organize their own. And I think that would be the latest and perhaps most substantial move by those five conferences away from the NCAA as it is currently structured, and toward potentially sort of a new leadership structure in college athletics. I don't think anybody is eager to just start rebuilding this from the ground up in the middle of everything that's going on, but there's also the old phrase, never waste a good crisis. When you look at, the way the conferences have approached realignment, the way they approached the autonomy discussion a few years ago, I would not be surprised if the climate is ripe, frankly, for an even greater sort of step away from, as I said, the NCAA as it's currently constituted.
Well, we've had all these things about how people want to play. They're going to do everything they can to play. And then on Monday, I believe it was Monday, Brady Feeney's mom posted something on social media that went viral. You talked to her for your story with the Indy Star, just about the struggles that Brady Feeney has had as a freshman offensive lineman for Indiana with his battle with COVID-19. What was kind of his mom's message when you talked to her and her reasoning behind just trying to get that post out there?
Yeah, so the backstory, first, Feeney's, as you said, he's a freshman offensive lineman from St. Louis. He's only been on campus, since the activity restart sometime in June. It wasn't clear whether he was in the first wave of players or the second that IU brought back in terms of football players, but he's been on campus since June. He tested negative when he got there, went through a full physical and everything. He was among the positive tests that were reported in July, at which point, according to his mother, Indiana retested the entire team. And once they did that, they found enough positive cases, I believe it was 6, if I'm remembering correctly, to shut down workouts for 2 weeks. He was isolated with 2 other positive members of the team. And about a week into kind of his fighting the virus, he began experiencing breathing problems. He visited the emergency room. My understanding is he didn't need to stay overnight or anything like that, but he did receive medication to help him manage that. From there, he basically got to a point where the virus passed, but because he'd had more severe symptoms than some of his teammates while he was fighting the virus, Indiana didn't just test him and find out he was negative and let him return. They also sent him back through kind of a battery of physical tests, including some tests on his heart and some blood work, which turned up something concerning. He's actually expected to see a cardiologist today for more information on that. So he's healthy. He's back with the team. He's healthy in the sense that he's now negative for COVID-19. But they're still figuring out some of these sort of after effects, these long-term complications that we're unfortunately seeing with a lot of COVID-19 patients, that we're still just kind of learning about how we can find these things and how we can predict them, and how just beating the virus doesn't mean that you don't walk away with more long-term complications. And what she said essentially was that her post was really not so much about, her son's health in the sense that he had since beaten the virus, but it was about the seriousness of the disease, because she said she just felt that too many people weren't taking it seriously enough. She didn't see, people, sort of in her daily life, in her community, whatever, wearing masks, socially distancing, just taking the threat of this seriously. And her point was, my son is young. He's healthy. He works out all the time. And yet this virus was still serious enough to send him to the emergency room, and could wind up having complications even after it has passed. And so it was more, I think, a message of trying to help people understand that everyone needs to take this seriously in a collective way, because it is dangerous for everyone. And I think in particular, she didn't say this, and I don't want to put words in her mouth, but I think for college sports in particular, it was just kind of another example or reminder of saying it's dangerous and, frankly, wrong to look at college athletes and think that because they're young and because, they do exercise, they work out all the time, and they're reasonably fit relative to the population, that this disease isn't a concern for them, because it is, and it will continue to be, maybe for a smaller percentage than other elements of the population, but it will be. And therefore asking them to sort of just shove the virus to one side to play sports without any protocols, without any guidelines, without any safety measures, probably isn't fair either.
Right.
And
I
again,
recall
that was me kind of talking there. That last part wasn't her, just to be clear.
Oh, right. I do recall her saying, though, bottom line is that even if she says your son's schools does everything right, follows every protocol, safety regulation to protect their child, their kid, their son, they can't ultimately protect them from this beast that is the coronavirus. So what you're saying is needs to be on the players front and the programs front. And of course, what she was saying was not that Indiana was doing anything wrong in particular, but that the virus is serious and it should be taken seriously. And shifting a bit off topic, you mentioned IU Purdue in a blip in the last answer that you had for us, but that is the only traditional rivalry that is set to be played on the last weekend of the regular season. So I want to get your take. That is a tradition that is so important to the state of Indiana. So how hopeful are you and our Indiana fans that it'll stick?
What's funny is that actually, for a very long time, was the traditional date for the bucket game. Back before we consolidated all of the major college football rivalries into the weekend after Thanksgiving, they were actually split between the two. And, people I'm sure some people will remember that, but for example, like Michigan, Ohio State, I think was typically the weekend after Thanksgiving, but Auburn, Alabama was typically the weekend before Thanksgiving. And of course, games like the Egg Bowl were played on Thanksgiving. So in that respect, there might be some people that are happy to have it back on that weekend. It's, it is obviously exceedingly difficult right now to say with any certainty that the game will actually happen on November 21st. But I think if you're an IU fan or a Purdue fan, and we do get to that point, it will just be maybe a small dose of normalcy in a season where, just to be quite frank, I don't think you're going to see fans in stands. I don't think you're going to see any kind of tailgating. I know that different schools are trying to work through policies and things. I just don't see a world where it's allowed anywhere. And so there's going to be, if the college football season happens, and I acknowledge up front that is a pretty big if it happens and it can be kept on schedule enough for that game to be played as scheduled, I suppose for both fan bases, it will at least be a small sort of sliver of normalcy in a season that otherwise just, won't feel that way. Because I think that college sports, quite frankly, college football in particular, more so than maybe the NFL, more so than maybe the NBA, maybe even, baseball, will probably feel more different without fans, because the college football is about what happens on the field, but the scenery and the atmosphere of college sports has long sort of been integral to its appeal, and the traditions, sort of the scenes, the size of the stadiums, the size of the crowds, those kinds of things. Just, I think it's going to be a lot harder. Not that you didn't have good atmospheres in the NFL or the NBA or wherever, but I think that professional sports games, could still feel, at times, atmospheres could still feel a little bit more sterilized. Not too much more, but certainly not kind of in the raw, sort of unbridled way that I think college sports really sort of thrived on, and in terms of that being part of the overall product and the overall experience. So that's kind of a meandering answer. I apologize, but I think if nothing else, it'll be something that IU and Purdue fans can count on being just a little bit more normal in a season that is likely to be anything but, if obviously it's completed.
Well, we like to pretend that, or not pretend, but just kind of look forward as if the schedule is going to happen, as if the season's going to happen. And when we had John Blau on, I asked him, like, what do we know about Michael Penix? Because it still feels like there's a lot of unknowns. And he joked, it's like, yeah, I was always on Michael Penix watch last year, because it was like, is he going to play? Is he not going to play? If he's healthy, if there's a season, what should IU fans, how optimistic should they be about Michael Penix and what he can do for this offense if given the full reins?
I mean, his numbers and his performances last season, by almost any metric, suggest that he can be a top line Big Ten quarterback. Maybe not quite at the level of a Justin Fields, but certainly not far off of that. Certainly, kind of at least in kind of, I would say, for lack of a better term, best of the rest. Just because when you talk about Justin Fields, you're talking about a Heisman candidate, potential future number 1 overall draft pick. And I don't think Penix has hit that level yet, but there's a lot to like about his tools. The question is just whether he can bulk up enough to stay healthy. And, 2 years ago, the injury against Penn State, was just kind of the result of an awkward fall, an awkward tackle, an awkward sort of half slide. I'm trying to remember exactly how that play unfolded. But last season, that's more where you sort of look at it and you see the, concussions can kind of happen to anyone, but then the shoulder issue and things like that. He's got to get bigger. He's got to get stronger. He's certainly, I think, got to learn something that it took Peyton Ramsey a couple of years to learn, which is how to protect yourself, how to deliver a blow when necessary, how to slide when necessary. Just that feel for knowing when contact is coming and how to handle it. If he can stay healthy, then I think I think that Indiana has frankly, probably as good of a quarterback as they've had in a while, and I include Nate Sudfeld in that. I think he's got all the tools. I think he's got the downfield ability. He's got the composure. I think last season's performances against the likes of Rutgers and Michigan State answered questions about maybe, whether he could make the short and intermediate throws as well as kind of show off a big arm. And I think he's also just got kind of a level of composure, a level of just sort of, maturity, I guess, that you need in a quarterback, that he doesn't get rattled by a lot. And so I think he could be a very, very good quarterback. It's just going to be a question of short term, can he prove that he can stay healthy over the course of an entire season? And long term, it's also worth pointing out, too, he's only a redshirt sophomore. Can Indiana keep the adequate range of weapons around him to get the most out of him? Because you look at a team like what you've got this year. Stevie Scott is going to be a junior. Ty Freifogel and Watt Fillier will be seniors. Peyton Hendershot will be a redshirt junior. You're probably going to see a number of those guys evaluating NFL options in next spring, whatever happens. So it's also going to be down to Indiana to make sure that he keeps, that they keep a good line in front of him and the pieces around him to help him be successful.
Well, this was a really young, especially on the defensive side of things last year, a relatively young team. Where could they make the biggest jump in terms of a position area for this football team to maybe take the next step?
That's a tough question because they return proven production just about everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
I think, I think the one area, maybe not in terms of a next step, but the area they probably need to shore up is wide receiver, because you did lose Donovan Hale and Nick Westbrook. You did, that's not just production, but it's kind of reliability. Those are guys that you could just rely on to make plays, to get downfield, to get in one-on-one situations, to give a quarterback an option if they need something to bail them out or they need to stretch the field kind of out of nothing. Obviously, you get Fillier back, you get Freifogel back. I think Miles Marshall can be a really important piece of that as well. But a wide receiver core needs depth. If you're going to play fast, you've got to be able to rotate guys without losing a lot of, production and impact. And that's where you're going to have to look to younger players, Jordan Jakes, Rashawn Williams, Deshaun Brown, Jacoby Hewitt. You need guys that have talent, but maybe need to be able to prove it, because they just haven't. They're either redshirt freshmen, or just haven't seen a lot of the field. So it's not really maybe, step up a level so much as it is guarantee that level doesn't come down, if that makes sense. The other one I'd throw out would be the defensive line. I think there's a lot of talent there. I think there's a lot of depth there, but I think Indiana needs to get to a place where it can create pressure, bringing no more than 4 or 5 guys against, mid to high level Big Ten teams. And it's not there just yet. I think, again, there's the potential there, and it's a lot of guys that have been around for 3-4 years, but Indiana kind of needs them to come together as a unit and really ramp up that production.
Well, while we have you here, I do want to ask you a quick thing about basketball. We had the draft deadline just a couple of days. Actually, I think it might have been yesterday. A lot of big names in the Big Ten decided to come back. Coburn, Garza, Aaron Henry. How deep could the Big Ten be in basketball?
I don't think it will be as deep as it is. I don't think it will be as deep as it was last year, in the sense that there was a time where we were talking about maybe 12 teams, in the NCAA tournament conversation. I think it will be better at the top, substantially better. And it was already pretty good. Obviously, you had the Michigan States, the Wisconsins. But I think that we'll genuinely be talking about 3 teams in the top 10, maybe even 4, depending on how the voters see Michigan State preseason. I think that, 1 through 7 probably in the conference is going to be very, very tough. And I think that it looks to me like it's the toughest the conference is mapping out to be. And of course, we'll find out in time. But the toughest it's mapping out to be since about 2013. And of course, that was a season when Indiana won the league. Michigan went to the title game. That was an exceptionally strong season, probably the strongest season I've ever covered in the conference. And I think that we could see the top end of the league. I don't know if you'll see 10, 11 teams all, kind of in the NCAA tournament conversation in mid-February like we did last year. But I think that you'll see kind of the meat and bones of the conference, frankly, as good as, if not better than anybody else in the country.
Well, Zach, we really appreciate you coming on. A big day for football, getting the new schedule, but we appreciate you shedding some light on everything. And best of luck to you. Best to your family. Stay safe and healthy.
Thanks for having me, as always.
Yeah,
Thanks, Zach.
That was Zach Osterman of the Indy Star joining us to talk a little IU football, a little IU basketball sprinkled in there at the end, but it felt right to just focus on football for the time being. There's so many question marks around it that you should be looking, if you're a governing body, at what you're going to do with basketball. But for us and for our sake, we'll try and keep things a little bit closer to the perspective. I know there's a lot of hungry IUBB fans out there who want to hear all the good things about their team. I promise you we'll get Zach back on there. We'll get Mike Miller on here. We'll talk some IU basketball as the year goes on. But tomorrow, I think some good stuff about the football team in general. And I think the Feeney family shedding some light on Brady's situation, I think that going viral and people seeing that, and for someone like you're a St. Louis, what is it? St. Louisian? Is that what it is? St. Louisan, just like the Feeneys, and obviously both of us going to the school that Brady's been at. And I think it's an eye opener. It's one of those things where you hear the reports like, here's who's at risk. And that, yeah, about 99% of the time that's true, but there's still that slimmer of chance that you or I, a healthy 20-year-old person, can get it. And it can have some severe ramifications, not only while having COVID, but post-COVID. So I think it was important that the Feeney family shared that and got their message out there, because look, no matter what you do, no matter what the people around you do, if you get this, it has ramifications, and it comes down to what you can do to protect yourself.
Right. And everyone has to keep each other accountable. I think that's the biggest thing. That's what Tom Allen was talking about. And just everyone has been saying that. If you're a player or you're you and I just talking about it right now, we have to keep each other accountable, keep each other safe, especially as everyone's getting back on campus within the next couple of days. I know you are going back to campus soon, and I'll be there in the next week. So it's just, we have to really take everything seriously. And especially the players, if they want to play, you gotta be safe and gotta do it in a smart way, and can't hate on anyone who decides to opt out or decides they cannot do it physically, because this is scary stuff. So we gotta keep our hearts open, our minds open, and really LEO, man.
Yeah, that's it's a time where all we can say is mask up. And I think that's the biggest thing. You can protect yourself, and more importantly, you can protect those around you. That's the biggest part of wearing a mask, is protecting those around you who may be at risk, especially if you're going to be inside a restaurant, especially if you're going to be in the grocery store. Look, it's not ideal. No one enjoys wearing a mask, but if people can wear masks in the hospitals going through these long shifts all day long, you can do it for the 30 minutes that you were at Kroger. I promise you will make it through. You will survive, and things will be better because of it. So hopefully we as a country will start to see that, and we can get what we were talking about with Zach, a fun football season that has a lot of intrigue to it. An Indiana team that's probably one of the deepest and most talented teams they've had in quite some time. So really a huge season coming up for Indiana, and we want to thank Zach. It's been a crazy day, I know, for all beat reporters with the schedule coming out and trying to get the stories done. We appreciate him giving us some time to hop on the pod with us. That'll wrap things up here for our Wednesday episode. Looking forward we're looking at this same format here coming up, just trying to stick and trying to get in more depth with one guest per show instead of two. So keep your eyes on that as we continue on into the month of August. We've got plenty planned in the future.
And on Friday, we are going to be having Deb Placey on, who is an NHL expert. She was with MSG Network, and now she does a lot for NHL Live. So we're going to be getting her updates on the NHL season because we really haven't touched on that yet. I'm so excited. I'll be on there with Connor on Friday at 11 a.m. Eastern.
I'm being given a day off, which is always exciting. I love doing the pod, but thanks to Tamara and Connor for subbing in for me on Friday. I will return on Monday from the new cave in Bloomington. They always say I never give them shout outs. So shout outs to my parents for housing me for the last 5 months and allowing me to do my podcast up in my room and giving me what I needed in terms of the privacy that is required to host these podcasts. But tomorrow, that'll wrap things up here for our Wednesday episode. We'll see you on Friday. Connor and Tamar joined by Deb Placey on our Friday episode just in a couple of days. Thanks to Zach Osterman again for stopping by. For Zach and Tamar, I'm Austin saying so long from today's episode. And remember, you can catch all our episodes on the IU Sports Media YouTube page and wherever you get podcasts under Unpaid Interns. Have a great rest of your week. We'll see you on Friday.